Welcome to the International Medical University. Today we present the story of two medical geniuses, the Einsteins of modern medicine.
Quietly sleeping in his bed, which the layperson would certainly not think is under stress. He's under some stress because his heart is continuing to beat. He has to go on using his respiratory muscles to breathe. Even his nervous system is working because he breathes. That absence of stress is death. Only the dead have no stress.
They had a clinic. They were very well known in the community, and they expected little hands, of course, to take over the clinic and to be a surgeon. He eventually did go into medicine, but he had other ideas.
The traditional approach was at the time, and still is today, that you are looking for a factor. And today you are now with the genes, and you look at micro substances. On parle de biologie moléculaire. So you hope to find the molecule which is not right to explain the change. That was not his way of thinking.
You see, we all have different stresses. We have different toxins and air pollution and family stress, job stress, and it all adds up. Poor diet and etc. We talk about the last straw on the camel's back that breaks the camel's back when we finally collapse. And oftentimes we blame that last straw, not recognizing that it's all of those different straws. The effect of complete accumulative stress. This weakens our system and makes disease.
Even as he was a medical student, he was impressed that many kinds of different diseases from different causes seem to end up making the patient have the same sort of pathological clinical picture. You know, so he began to wonder, well, there's some common factor here which is quite in addition to the bacterium or the trauma or whatever, it ends up making the patient express what he later described as the stress syndrome.
If something is asked of your body, you have to adapt to it. And the way you adapt to it, of course, is what he figured out was that all of this, what he later on called stressors, act through your brain, and in your brain actually release certain factors. Particularly, one of the most important ones would be ACTH, or adrenocorticotropic hormone, which is a hormone produced, which indeed affects the adrenals, and the adrenals then produce or synthesize the steroids in response to this.
He was a very hard-working researcher and teacher, and it was later on when he came over to the University of Montreal and had a much bigger experimental laboratory set up here and more of a staff, that he began to develop the impact of his stress syndrome idea took hold, and then it exploded because it did have the effect of linking together something that had never been sort of synthesized before. That is, that there's a general reaction of the body to all forms of what he called stress.
In each chain there is one link which is the weakest, and no matter what stress you put on it, and no matter what direction, it will always predictably break right there.
You see, that weak link, what we all have, genetically, everybody has some type of weakness, whether it's gallbladder, brain, nerves, bones, cartilage, etc. And that weak link will break when we get too much stress. It's stress and stressors that accumulate that cause disease. and break the weak link.
It is just the same in medicine, and much of our scientific work in the laboratory here was concerned with the establishment of the particular conditioning circumstances or predisposing circumstances which make an experimental animal react with one or the other type of stress disease.
He never undertook an investigation without covering everything, to the point that I became épuisé. He wanted to have all that had been done on that subject. And by all, he meant all. In fact, he had no shortcut. He was the most organized person I ever met.
I would say a thirst for learning and for knowledge to begin with, an incredible curiosity, coupled with, incredible stamina, an incredible amount of energy. I met him when he was in his 60s and he was almost running, even though he had problems with one hip.
Well, then, later on in his career, as you know, this whole idea of a stress syndrome was not just a physiological and pathological thing based on his rat experiments, but it became a general societal thing. That is, today, terrorism is something that stresses everybody out today. So it became an enormous philosophical, economic, social problem. And if he were alive today, I think he would be extraordinarily interested in what's going on in a global sense.
First of all, I think one has to realize his contributions. And I think realizing his contributions, it's no minor matter. So I think that for those of us that studied with him, if we did not really, admire his accomplishments and his way of being and his contributions to medicine, science, and society, we would be very ungrateful.
Since 1945, Hans Selye has worked here at the University of Montreal as Director of Experimental Medicine and Surgery. The university is now a world center for the study of stress.
The whole concept arose from the observation that in addition to specific diseases, such as a gastric ulcer or typhoid or tuberculosis, there is a syndrome, a set of manifestations, a set of disease signs, which is common to all diseases. For example, that you lose your appetite, you feel ill, you have no energy, you want to lie down rather than get up. And when I was a medical student, I became very interested in this. It didn't seem to me an obvious thing that should exist, that there should exist such a thing as what I called at the time a syndrome of just being sick from anything. And when I published my first paper on it, some 10 years after I first confronted that problem as a medical student, I published it in the British journal Nature under the title A Syndrome Produced by Various Noxious Agents.
What are the diseases of stress?
Well, actually stress plays a certain role in any disease, because any disease causes an increased demand. You always have to come back to this definition in order to understand it. But there are some diseases in which stress is a decisive factor. And there are a whole lot of diseases that have no apparent cause. And people have been looking for the cause of it for a long time, but there is no cause. Because the cause is just any effort. Anything that causes stress.
What is your personal attitude towards stress, towards the stress that's put on you?
Stress is the salt of life. You have to be under stress in order to make life worthwhile. If a person has very much to express and feels that he is very creative, making it impossible for him to exteriorize himself is the most terrible stress that you can put on him. So my philosophy is based on the concept, not of being lazy and sitting around and doing nothing and trying to get the shortest working hours, but to work on the stress level for which I was born. Now, some people are more phlegmatic and others have more a need to express themselves. I have a fairly intense need for work. I need it. I couldn't exist without it. But I don't fight for things which I don't win. At least I must be convinced I can win, otherwise I don't fight.
You just give up?
I just give up. I admit defeat and do something else.
Ladies and gentlemen, Canadian Medical Hall of Fame laureate for 2006, Dr. Hans Selye.
Selye had seen a new medicine, a complete medicine, a modern medicine, based on the ideas that stress and accumulative stressors will build up and weaken the body so the body can no longer resist different diseases. This was a revolutionary idea, but it went against the drug companies.
The stress response. In stressful situations, the body switches on its autonomic nervous system and neurobiological processes in an attempt to maintain homeostasis. The body is prepared for its reaction to stress. In the brain, the hypothalamus is connected to the pituitary gland. The hypothalamus, stimulated by the sympathetic nervous system, releases the hormone corticotrophin-releasing factor, CRF. The CRF activates the pituitary gland to release the adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH. This in turn alerts the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands are located on top of each kidney. The ACTH from the pituitary gland stimulates the adrenal cortex to release cortisol. At the same time, neurons in the hypothalamus signal the medulla to release epinephrine, adrenaline, and norepinephrine, noradrenaline. These hormones then push the body into hyperalertness.
As we go into different stress, it causes tension on the nerves, the adrenals, and that flight or fight reaction causes multiple parts of the body to sometimes be overdone. We often find that the short-term type of stresses, where we get intense stress, creates troubles with the parasympathetic system. Thus it is with digestion, ulcers, etc., where the long, short stress, the bursts that are tiny and daily and every day, those little stressors, those would create problems in the joints and create problems with the autonomic nervous system. So thereby stress becomes the thing that affects the body. The pathways of stress all create openings for the disease and different diseases to flourish.
Have you ever felt sick to your stomach during a test? Have you had days when you were so loaded down with homework and psychology that you had trouble sleeping? Have you ever been so worried about something that you ended up with a terrible headache? If so, then you know what it's like to feel stressed. You've probably heard people say, "Wow, I'm really stressed out," or "This is making me totally stressed." Maybe you hear adults even saying stuff like that. Well, then you know that you're experiencing stress. Stress is what you feel when you are worried or uncomfortable about something. This worry is in your mind and can make your body feel bad. You may feel angry, frustrated, scared, or afraid, which can give you stomachache or a headache, like this man in this picture. Everyone knows about stress. Either you experienced it when you moved, had a difficult relationship, lost your job, or experienced the death of someone close to you. You know this kind of stress. It goes on for a while and you have to deal with it, for better or for worse, every day. So, is there a clear connection between stress and illness? Yes, there is. And over the couple of decades, researchers in psychology and medicine have worked together to establish that connection, and that it does exist. For example, psychosomatic illnesses are health problems that are caused primarily by psychological factors rather than by physical ones. Health psychologists did make the point that your life stress has to do with the changes that you had to deal with in your life. Every person deals with different amount of stress in their lives and different amount of experiences over time. How can researchers measure life stress? Obviously, it would not be ethical for psychologists to bring people into a laboratory, expose them to stressful events, and wait for them to become ill. Not just that that would be so wrong, it would not even represent how stress works in real life. That's why Holmes and Ray developed a written scale to measure life stress. Holmes and Ray made a list of 43 life events that people commonly feel stressful. In this picture, it is some of them. And some of them are death of a spouse, divorce, jail term, death of a close family member, marriage, being fired at work, retirement, and sex difficulties, and many more. In an attempt to measure life changes, Holmes and Ray developed the Life Event Scale. That's what it's called. It's also known as the Holmes and Ray Social Readjustment Rating Scale. The life events are ranked in order from the most stressful, death of spouse, to the least stressful, minor violations of the law. After getting the results of about 400 participants, they compared the results versus male and female, white and black, young and old, and other different types of people to each other. And they wanted to make sure that this scale would be applied to all people with an approximate equal degree of accuracy, and it was. In this cartoon, you can see some judges bringing up mean, negative things like you suck, loser, and burn him. Well, in life and everywhere you go, there will be some criticism, and for Holmes and Ray development of their scale, many researchers have come up with concerns about its accuracy and usefulness. One of the main criticism regards the fact that they use both positive and negative life events in the same scale, as well as events that are both in the person's control and not in the person's control. In spite of its limitation, this work of Holmes and Ray continues to hold its place as a popular stress research tool. Although other tools for measuring stress have been and are being developed, this research scale is still chosen frequently by researchers. An average of 100 studies per year cite this scale, which makes it an often cited study. The relationship between stress and illness, although real, is complex and not a simple matter to study. Psychology and medicine professionals working together have recognized that all illnesses contain a psychological component in how they develop, how are treated, and how people recover. Are you wondering if you're stressed? Are you feeling tension in your shoulders and neck? Because that is a first sign to show you are feeling stressed. So, tips for dealing with stress? Don't worry about things you can't control, such as the weather. Prepare the best of your ability for events you know may be stressful, such as a job interview or a big psychology test next week. Try to look at change as a positive challenge, not as a threat, and work to resolve conflicts with people. Talk to a good friend, family member, or a teacher like Mr. Williams. And set realistic goals at home and at work. Exercise regularly, eat well, balance meals, and get enough sleep. Maybe even meditate. Participate in something that you don't find stressful, that's fun, like sports or a social club. And just remember, life is not that stressful.
It's not the stress that kills us, it's our reactions to it. That's what Selye taught us. That's what he taught me when I worked with him. I worked with him, and as he worked these different books, these monumental books, that really brought the ideas of stress to us, he talked about eustress, how there was good stress. In his book on the nature of stress, he actually quotes at the end about me, Dr. Nelson, and how I might be able to pick up and make this type of medicine more. There are three basic ways that we think. We have these different coping skills, the rationalizations, and our little word area of the brain is such a very small part. You see, the word area gets 1% of 1% of 1% of 1% of 1%. And it's our logical area, but it's not really in tune with all of us. It's just one way. There's also an emotional limbic system that's deep beneath, and this is connected to the heart, where we get broken heart and these other different things. Then we have the solar plexus, the deep part of us that's connected to it all. These different things make us and connect us, and the solar plexus, that all connection, is more important. Now we have alarm stage, adaptation stage, and exhaustion stage. Because what ease is life, ease of flow, and dis-ease is when something happens that breaks it. We get into an alarm response. Some type of stressor comes along, and it could be many different types of stressors and stresses, and it creates an alarm response, a cough. Here we talk about bang your head here and stress reduction kit. That initial alarm is the cough, the itch, the burning, the runny eyes. And then things get worse. Things start to slip. Of course I'm stressed. I'm married with 3 teenage daughters in one bathroom. Stress is an anxiety factor, but anxiety stress continues after the stressor is gone. When the stressor is gone and you're still stressed, then it's anxiety. The first part is the alarm reaction. Then, if the stressor continues, we go into a type of adaptation syndrome where we try to resist the stress, but we don't do it very well. It's called adaptation syndrome. In the adaptation syndrome, we adapt to the stress, but the disease goes deep. As we adapt to the stressor or stressors, the disease progresses deeper and deeper and deeper. And the alarm symptoms go away. The symptoms go away. Thus we think we're okay. We are wrong. You can have no symptoms and be really, really sick. Being symptom-free is not an indicator of health. Let's repeat the most important words of medicine. Being symptom-free is not an indicator of health. Thus, allopathic medicine is no longer valid. We cannot go to the doctor with our symptoms because being symptom-free is not an indicator of health. The symptoms and the verbal symptoms that we form in our brain are not an indication of our diseases and the condition of our body. Adaptation happens as we adapt to the stressor, but the disease goes deeper. We get a reduction in the size of cells and atrophy. We get many different things as the stimulus, the stressor, continues and creates problems and eventually exhaustion, ill health, and breakdown. This works through the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system as well as the different cells. And this creates the different types of stress and stressors that push that system of disease deeper and deeper. We palliate the symptoms, and when the symptoms go away, we think that we're correct and healthy. We are not. It's important for us to realize that many of the different things that we take for granted, like sugar and drugs, just push disease deeper. And death by medicine becomes a constant threat, because it is very true that the drugs, most of the drugs, do not really cure anything. They simply palliate as the disease and the stress and the cellular problems go deeper and deeper. After the alarm adaptation, we have functional and organic, eventually leading to exhaustion and death. In our books, we cover this much more thoroughly. As I worked with Selye up in Montreal, we were able to deeply get into this, and I've been able to work deeper and explain it even more. Of course, this little video is just an introduction. You have to get into the books to understand it much more completely. As we have the Nelson method of being able to reduce the causes and then help the tissues unblock the blockages and get to all those different straws on that back. It isn't just dealing with the last straw. It's dealing with all the straws. It's dealing with a holistic system. Here we have the stress scale. As we talked before, see this idea that all the different stresses that happen to us accumulate and create problems. We need to reduce that, and we need to look at all of the causes of disease and lack of awareness, heredity, allergies, toxicity, trauma, pathogens, deficiencies, excess of nutrients, all these different things, and how they affect the organs and how we can fix the organs, how we can deal with all of this. Because stress is the major factor that creates problems in the body, allowing disease to flourish. The doctor of the future will give no medicines, but interest his patients in the care of the human frame. This we need a holistic type of health and fitness. We got to go beyond the body, mind, and spirit. Because physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, this was just you, it was egocentric. To this we must add social and environmental, because we are social, networking people, and we live in an environment. What we sow, we shall reap. We need to look at all of these factors, which I try to teach in the courses. We need to deal with all the different types of stress and stressors, broadening our ideas and expanding our mind. as Selye would have us do. We need to look at this in the general adaptation syndrome and a new form of medicine that we bring to you. Thank you. This is the Angel signing off.